The unlikely rescue. Clara pulled her jacket tighter as the icy winds of the alien moon howled around her. Her shuttle lay a smoking wreck several kilometers away, and she had been walking for hours. The barren landscape stretched endlessly, a mix of jagged rocks and purple-hued skies. Her oxygen levels were dropping, and she knew she needed to find shelter or help soon. She adjusted her helmet, its display flickering with warnings, and trudged forward. Suddenly, her boot caught on something, and she stumbled. Looking down, she gasped. Beneath her lay a figure, an alien, tall and willowy, with shimmering silver skin and intricate robes torn and bloodied. Clara hesitated. She had read about this species in galactic studies. The Lyrans were a reclusive race, known for their intelligence, but rarely seen outside their territory. This one looked badly injured, its breathing shallow and labored. Clara's instincts screamed at her to move on. Helping this alien could cost her precious time. Yet something in her couldn't leave him there to die. She knelt beside him, her breath fogging the air. "Can you hear me?" she asked, her voice steady despite her fear. The alien's eyes flickered open, glowing faintly. He murmured something in a language she didn't understand. Clara activated her translator, but the device struggled with the dialect. Finally, a few words came through. "Help me, please." Clara looked around. The wind had picked up, and the sky darkened ominously. She had no idea how far she was from safety, but she couldn't leave him here. "I'll try," she said. "Hold on." The alien's lower body was pinned under a chunk of metal, likely debris from a crash. Clara assessed the situation, her mind racing. Using her portable plasma cutter, she began to work on the metal. Sparks flew as the cutter hummed, and Clara's hands shook with the effort. "Stay awake," she urged him. "What's your name?" The alien groaned but managed to whisper, "Calyx." "Calyx, I'm Clara. We're going to get through this." Minutes felt like hours as Clara freed him. When the metal finally shifted, Calyx let out a gasp of relief. His leg was badly injured, and his mobility device, his sleek, floating platform, was shattered. "This device," he said weakly, pointing at it. Clara examined the device. Its power core was intact but disconnected. She rummaged through her toolkit, her fingers numb from the cold. With swift but careful movements, she rewired the core and patched the damaged circuits. "Come on," she muttered, pressing the activation button. The device hummed to life, and Clara helped Calyx onto it. He winced in pain, but managed to stabilize himself. "Thank you," he said, his voice stronger now. Before Clara could reply, a distant roar cut through the air. Her heart raced. The sound was guttural and fierce, unlike anything she had ever heard. "What is that?" she asked, scanning the horizon. Calyx's eyes widened with fear. "Predators. This moon. Not safe." Clara swallowed hard. Her translator struggled with the specifics, but she understood the gist. They were being hunted. "We need to move," she said, gripping the controls of the mobility device and steering Calyx forward. The landscape grew more treacherous as they pushed on. Rocks jutted out like teeth, and the ground became uneven. Clara's oxygen monitor beeped again, a grim reminder of her dwindling resources. Calyx noticed her concern. "Shelter, cave, near," he said, pointing weakly toward a cluster of rocks in the distance. Clara nodded and quickened her pace, her legs burning with exhaustion. The roars grew louder, echoing off the rocky terrain. Finally, they reached the cave, a narrow entrance that opened into a dimly lit cavern. Clara helped Calyx inside and collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. She checked her oxygen levels, just enough to last a few more hours. Calyx, despite his pain, studied her with an intense gaze. "Why? Help me?" Clara shrugged, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's what we do. Humans help when we can." Calyx nodded slowly, as if her answer intrigued him. He closed his eyes and Clara leaned back, her mind racing. Just as she began to relax, a shadow moved at the cave's entrance. Clara froze, her hand instinctively reaching for her plasma cutter. Whatever was outside wasn't giving up easily. The Elder's Gratitude. The morning on the alien moon arrived in eerie silence, with dim light filtering through the cave's narrow entrance. Clara woke to find Caelix studying her intently. His silvery skin shimmered faintly, even in the low light, and his wounds looked slightly better after the crude bandaging she had applied the night before. "You saved me," Caelix said, his voice more steady now. His translator had adjusted to her language, and his words carried an almost regal tone. "Few would risk their lives for a Lyran. My people are not known for their kindness to outsiders." Clara shrugged, brushing the dust off her jacket. "Well, humans don't really keep score like that. You needed help. That's all." Caelix tilted his head, his glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "A rare perspective. Perhaps why your species is both admired and feared." Clara wasn't sure how to respond to that. Instead, she turned her attention to her equipment. Her oxygen supply was dangerously low, and their odds of being rescued felt slim. But before she could spiral into panic, Caelix raised a hand. "I can call for aid," he said. "My house controls many fleets, but the predators outside will make any approach dangerous." Clara looked at him, surprised. "You have a way to communicate. Why didn't you say so earlier?" Caelix gestured weakly to his robes, where a small disc-shaped device was embedded in the fabric. It was cracked and barely functional. Clara grabbed her toolkit, leaning closer to examine it. This might work," she muttered, her fingers already moving to repair the delicate circuits. Caelix watched her with a mix of curiosity and awe. "You're skilled," he remarked. "Unusual for someone of your years." "Yeah, well, surviving out here doesn't leave much room for sitting around," Clara replied, not looking up from her work. "You learn quick or you don't make it." Caelix was silent for a moment. Then, with an almost imperceptible sigh, he said, "You remind me of someone. My granddaughter." Clara paused, glancing up at him. "Your granddaughter?" "Yes," he said, his voice softening. "Reyna. She has a fire in her, much like you. But she lacks direction. Perhaps that is why I think she could learn much from someone like you." Clara didn't respond, focusing instead on the device. She had never been one for small talk, especially with aliens. Yet something about Caelix's tone struck a chord in her. There was a deep sadness there, hidden beneath his formal words. After several tense minutes, the device flickered to life. Caelix smiled faintly, his pride evident. He activated it, speaking in his native tongue. Moments later, a series of melodic tones echoed back, a response. "My people are coming," he said, relief washing over his features. "They will arrive soon." "Good," Clara said, leaning back. "Now let's hope your friends don't take too long. I'd rather not meet those predators up close." Caelix chuckled softly. "They will come swiftly. My house owes me much." His words hung in the air, and Clara couldn't help but notice how cryptic they were. "Your house? What do you mean by that?" Caelix gave her a thoughtful look. "You do not know who I am, do you?" "Should I?" Clara asked, raising an eyebrow. He smiled, a weary, knowing smile. "I am Caelix, Vereen of the High Lyran Council. My name alone carries weight across the stars. And you, Clara, have saved not just a life, but a symbol of my people's legacy." Clara blinked, the weight of his words sinking in. She had heard stories of the High Lyran Council, a ruling body that controlled vast swathes of galactic territory. If Caelix was who he claimed to be, she had unknowingly stumbled into something far bigger than herself. Before she could respond, a distant hum grew louder, reverberating through the cavern walls. Caelix's expression brightened. "They are here." Clara followed him to the cave's entrance, where a sleek Lyran transport ship descended gracefully. Its design was unlike anything she had ever seen, with shimmering panels that seemed to shift colors like liquid silver. A group of tall, elegant Lyrans emerged, their robes flowing as they approached. The leader of the group bowed deeply to Calyx. "Elder Vereen, we feared the worst. I owe my survival to this human," Calyx said, gesturing to Clara. His tone carried both respect and gratitude, a stark contrast to the way Lyrans typically spoke of other species. Clara stood awkwardly as the Lyrans turned their attention to her. She had never been comfortable with formalities, let alone being the center of attention among a group of aliens. "You will come with us," Calyx said firmly, breaking the silence. "You have proven yourself worthy of the hospitality of my house." "Wait, what?" Clara asked, startled. "I was just trying to help. I'm not looking for." "You saved my life," Calyx interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Lyran honor demands that I repay this debt. And—" he paused, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I have a feeling this is only the beginning of your journey." Clara hesitated, the reality of her situation dawning on her. She had gone from a stranded engineer to a guest of a Lyran elder in the span of a day. Despite her misgivings, a part of her couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. As she boarded the transport ship, Clara glanced back at the desolate moon one last time. Whatever challenges awaited her, she knew this was a turning point, a moment that would shape the rest of her life. A grandfather's plot. Clara stood awkwardly in the grand hall of Calyx's estate, her boots sinking slightly into the soft, luminescent floor. The Lyran homeworld was unlike anything she had imagined. Floating crystalline towers, glowing rivers that defied gravity, and skies alive with shifting auroras. It was breathtaking, but Clara felt entirely out of place. Calyx, now fully recovered and draped in regal robes, approached her with a calm yet calculating expression. His presence commanded respect, but his smile carried warmth. "Clara," he began, "I trust you are finding our world intriguing." "That's one way to put it," Clara replied, glancing at the ornate carvings on the walls, each glowing faintly with some unspoken significance. "But I don't exactly fit in here." Calyx chuckled softly. "You underestimate yourself. Your courage and ingenuity surpass many in my own race, and you've already proven yourself invaluable." Clara shifted uncomfortably. Compliments from a galactic elder weren't something she had ever expected to receive. "I just did what anyone would have done." Calyx's glowing eyes narrowed slightly, as though weighing her words. "Perhaps, but few would have succeeded as you did." Before Clara could respond, a new presence entered the hall. A young Lyran woman with sharp, angular features and piercing violet eyes strode in, her movements exuding confidence and authority. She was dressed in a sleek outfit that combined traditional Lyran design with a modern edge, and her gaze immediately locked onto Clara. "This is her," the woman said, her voice carrying a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Yes," Calyx replied, his tone softening. "Clara, meet my granddaughter, Reyna." Reyna approached, her eyes scanning Clara from head to toe. There was no malice in her expression, but neither was there warmth. "You're smaller than I expected." Clara raised an eyebrow. "And you're taller than I expected." The corner of Reyna's mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly. "Grandfather says you're resourceful. I suppose time will tell." Clara glanced at Calyx, confused. "Time will tell. What does that mean?" Calyx placed a hand on Reyna's shoulder, a rare show of affection for a Lyran elder. "Reyna is the future of our house. She is brilliant, but stubborn. She has much to learn, and I believe you may be the perfect teacher." Clara blinked, her confusion deepening. "Teacher? I think you've got the wrong human. I'm just an engineer. I'm not here to." Calyx held up a hand, silencing her gently. "You underestimate your impact. Reyna needs to understand the value of perspectives beyond our own. Your bravery and ingenuity have already proven invaluable. Now, I wish for her to see what I see." Reyna crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. This is absurd, grandfather. What could I possibly learn from a human? Caelix smiled faintly, a glimmer of mischief in his eyes. That, my dear, is precisely why you need to spend time with her. Clara felt a growing sense of unease. She wasn't sure what Caelix's plan was, but she didn't like being thrust into the middle of some family dynamic she barely understood. Look, she said, addressing both of them, I appreciate the gratitude, but I'm not really sure I'm cut out for whatever this is. Caelix stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Humor an old man, Clara. Reyna has the potential to be a great leader, but she needs someone who challenges her, someone who isn't afraid to push back. Clara frowned. And you think that's me? I know it is, Caelix said, his tone resolute. Before Clara could argue further, Caelix clapped his hands, and a series of holographic panels materialized around them. They displayed various projects Reyna was overseeing, advanced starship designs, intricate energy grids, and ambitious terraforming initiatives. These are Reyna's current endeavors, Caelix explained. Brilliant, yes, but lacking the innovation and adaptability that humans are known for. I wish for you to work with her, even if only for a short time. Clara sighed, realizing there was no easy way out of this. Fine, she said reluctantly, but don't blame me if she hates me by the end of it. Reyna smirked. The feeling might be mutual. Caelix watched them both with a satisfied expression, his plan already in motion. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he believed the clash of their perspectives could create something extraordinary. As Clara and Reyna began their uneasy partnership, Caelix retreated to his chambers, his mind already plotting the next steps. This wasn't just about teaching Reyna a lesson or repaying a debt. It was about shaping the future of his house, and perhaps the future of the galaxy itself. Cultural clashes and connections. Clara and Reyna stood at the edge of a towering observation deck overlooking one of the most breathtaking landscapes Clara had ever seen. The Lyran capital city sprawled below them, its structures shimmering like living crystals. Floating walkways connected the buildings, and streams of glowing liquid coursed through the streets like rivers of light. Despite the awe-inspiring view, the tension between them was thick. Clara adjusted her jacket against the brisk wind while Reyna, tall and poised, stood with her arms crossed, her violet eyes fixed on the horizon. This project, Reyna began coldly, pointing to the holographic display hovering between them, requires precision and control. Your human improvisation is neither needed nor welcome. Clara sighed, running a hand through her messy hair. Look, I get that you have a system, but maybe that's the problem. Systems break, and when they do, you need someone who can think on their feet. Reyna's gaze snapped to Clara, her expression sharp. Systems do not break when executed correctly. Your reliance on chaos is what makes your kind so volatile. Clara bit back a retort, forcing herself to stay calm. Volatile or not, we adapt. That's why I'm here, right? To show you how humans approach things. She gestured to the holographic schematics of a massive energy relay station. Your design is efficient, sure, but what happens if this central node fails? The whole grid collapses. Reyna narrowed her eyes, but her curiosity was piqued. And what would you suggest instead? Clara leaned forward, her confidence growing. Decentralize it. Create smaller, redundant nodes that can take over if one goes offline. It's not as sleek, but it's more reliable. Reyna stared at the display, her fingers twitching as though she wanted to dismiss Clara's suggestion outright. Instead, she tapped a command into the holographic panel, running a simulation based on Clara's idea. The results were clear. The decentralized design held up better under stress scenarios. Hemph, Reyna muttered, clearly displeased but unwilling to admit defeat. Clara smirked. See, chaos isn't so bad. Reyna turned sharply, her tone icy. Do not mistake one successful suggestion for validation of your methods. This collaboration is temporary. Trust me, I'm counting the days. Clara shot back. The first clash. Their next task brought them deep into the Lyran wilderness, a sprawling, untamed forest of bioluminescent trees and shimmering plant life. They were tasked with repairing a malfunctioning terraforming beacon that maintained the delicate balance of the ecosystem. Reyna moved with calculated precision, her every step deliberate. Clara, on the other hand, wove her way through the dense foliage with the ease of someone who had spent years fixing things in the most unpredictable environments. This way, Reyna instructed, consulting her holomap. "Your map's great and all," Clara replied, brushing a glowing vine out of her way. "But the beacon's energy signature is stronger this way." She pointed toward a narrow path that veered off from the main trail. Reyna hesitated, clearly annoyed. "The map is based on data collected over centuries. I trust it more than your instincts. And that's why you're stuck wandering while I'd already found the problem," Clara quipped, crouching beside a faintly glowing console buried in the undergrowth. Reyna joined her, glaring. "You could have mentioned that sooner." Clara shrugged, a mischievous grin on her face. "Where's the fun in that?" Together, they worked on the beacon, though their approaches couldn't have been more different. Reyna meticulously followed the manual, while Clara bypassed unnecessary steps to get to the root of the issue. "Careful," Reyna snapped as Clara pried open a panel with her multi-tool. "You'll damage the core." "I'll fix it if I do," Clara replied, not looking up. "Just trust me." The beacon's hum deepened, and its glow brightened. Clara stepped back, wiping her hands on her pants. "There, good as new." Reyna stared at the beacon, grudging respect flickering in her eyes. "Impressive," she admitted reluctantly. Clara grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." A moment of understanding. As they made their way back to the transport, night fell, and the forest came alive with light. The bioluminescent flora glowed in a mesmerizing array of colors, and tiny creatures flitted through the air, leaving trails of light behind them. Reyna stopped suddenly, her expression softening as she looked around. "This is why we fight to preserve our world," she said quietly. Clara followed her gaze, struck by the rare vulnerability in Reyna's voice. "It's beautiful," she agreed, "but you don't have to do it alone." Reyna turned to Clara, her usual sharpness replaced by curiosity. "Your people, you collaborate in ways we do not. Even when you argue, you find a way to move forward." "How?" Clara thought for a moment. "Because we know we're stronger together. We're all flawed, but those flaws make us adaptable. We lean on each other's strengths to make up for our weaknesses." Reyna fell silent, her expression unreadable. For the first time, she seemed to truly consider Clara's words. Back at the estate. When they returned to the estate, Kalix greeted them with his ever-knowing smile. "You've both returned in one piece," a promising sign. Reyna shot him a glare, but there was no real venom behind it. "Do not read too much into it, grandfather." Clara smirked. "We didn't kill each other, so that's progress." Kalix watched them with satisfaction. His plan was working, albeit slowly. The human and his granddaughter were beginning to find common ground, and he could already see the potential of what their combined strengths could achieve. The bond deepens. The crisp air of the Lyran wilderness carried the scent of rain as Clara and Reyna stood on opposite sides of a towering alien structure. The machine, an ancient Lyran water purifier, had malfunctioned, threatening the surrounding settlements with both flooding and drought. Its sheer size was intimidating, with glowing veins of energy coursing through its metallic surface, but Clara barely noticed. She was too busy staring at the problem. The main energy conduit had been corroded and required immediate replacement. "This design is unnecessarily complicated," Clara muttered, hands on her hips. She glanced at Reyna, who stood beside her with a datapad, her posture rigid. "I mean, who thought it was a good idea to route all the power through one point?" "It was efficient when it was built," Reyna snapped, clearly irked. "Not everything needs to be patched together with human improvisation." Clara smirked, grabbing her toolkit. "Efficient until it breaks, and then what?" You wait for an engineer like me to fix it." Without waiting for a response, she began climbing the side of the structure, her multi-tool flashing as she scanned the damage. Reyna glared up at her. "If you fall, don't expect me to catch you." "Noted," Clara called back, the teasing lilt in her voice doing little to hide the strain of climbing. The first teamwork test. As Clara reached the corroded conduit, her multi-tool buzzed with warnings. The damage was worse than she'd thought, and a quick fix wasn't going to cut it. She sighed, pressing her communicator. "Reyna, I need you to shut down the auxiliary power before I can replace this. Can you handle that?" Reyna bristled at the question. "Of course I can handle it," she replied sharply. "Unlike you, I don't rely on guesswork." Clara rolled her eyes but kept her tone light. "Then hurry up. I'm not keen on getting fried up here." Down below, Reyna approached the control panel. Its interface was old, even by Lyran standards, and required manual overrides. She worked quickly, her fingers dancing over the glowing controls. But as she deactivated the power, the machine emitted a low, ominous hum. "Reyna." Clara called down nervously. "What was that?" Reyna's eyes widened as the panel displayed an unexpected warning. "The system's backup protocols are activating. It's trying to reroute power directly to where you are." Clara swore under her breath, her heart racing. "Well, shut it down." "I'm trying." Reyna snapped, her calm facade cracking as she frantically searched for a solution. "The controls are locked out." Clara's gamble. Clara's mind raced. She couldn't wait for Reyna to sort this out. The glowing energy veins around her were beginning to pulse erratically, and the air crackled with static. She glanced at the damaged conduit and made a decision. "Reyna," she said, her voice firm, "I'm going to bypass the backup system manually." "That's reckless," Reyna shot back. "You'll destabilize the entire structure." "Do you have a better idea?" Clara challenged. Reyna hesitated, the weight of the situation pressing on her. "Fine, but if this fails, we'll both be responsible." Clara grinned despite the tension. Teamwork at its finest. Balancing precariously, Clara worked quickly, using her multi-tool to reroute the energy flow away from the damaged conduit. Sparks flew, and the machine groaned under the strain. Reyna, watching from below, felt a pang of unease as she realized just how close Clara was to the exposed energy core. "Be careful," Reyna shouted, surprising herself with the concern in her voice. "I thought you didn't care if I fell." Clara quipped, her tone light, but her focus unbroken. With one final adjustment, the hum of the machine settled into a steady rhythm. The glowing veins stabilized, and the system rebooted. Clara exhaled in relief, her hands trembling as she climbed down. A turning point. When Clara reached the ground, Reyna was waiting, her arms crossed. "That was reckless," she said, her tone sharp. Clara shrugged, her smirk returning. "Maybe. But it worked." Reyna opened her mouth to argue but stopped. Instead, she sighed. "Yes, it did." Her voice softened. "You did well." Clara blinked, caught off guard by the compliment. "Thanks. You weren't so bad yourself." For the first time, Reyna smiled, a small, fleeting smile, but genuine nonetheless. "You're not as incompetent as I thought." "Wow," Clara said, pretending to be offended. "High praise coming from you." Reyna chuckled softly, and the tension between them seemed to ease. For the first time, they stood as equals, their mutual respect finally taking root. The bond grows. As they returned to the estate, the air between them felt lighter. Clara found herself sharing stories of her time as an engineer on human colonies, how she'd once repaired a transport ship with nothing but duct tape and sheer determination. Reyna, despite herself, listened with interest, occasionally asking questions. "You humans are fascinating," Reyna admitted after a particularly outrageous story. "You thrive in chaos." Clara laughed. "And you Lyrans thrive on perfection. Maybe that's why we make such a good team." Raina didn't respond immediately, but there was a thoughtful look in her eyes. "Perhaps," she said finally, "but don't let it go to your head." By the time they reached the estate, Caelix was waiting for them, his expression unreadable. "I trust the mission was a success?" he asked. Raina nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Yes, grandfather." Clara's unconventional methods were surprisingly effective. Caelix's gaze shifted to Clara, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "And how did Raina fare?" Clara grinned. "She's not half as terrifying as she looks." Raina rolled her eyes, but there was no venom in her gesture. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of pride, not just in her accomplishments, but in their shared success. Caelix watched them both with quiet satisfaction. His plan was working, and the bond between Clara and Raina was growing stronger by the day. The truth revealed. The Lyran night sky was a tapestry of glowing constellations and auroras, casting a soft light over the grand estate of Caelix. Inside the vast crystal hall, Clara sat at a sleek floating table, a cup of steaming alien tea in her hands. She could feel the tension in the room like a tangible force. Raina stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her back to Clara, her arms crossed tightly. The glow of the city lights reflected off her sharp features, making her look almost otherworldly. The silence between them was heavy. Caelix had just left after an abrupt announcement, revealing his true intentions. He had orchestrated the collaboration between Clara and Raina, hoping they would learn from one another. But to Raina, it felt like a betrayal. "You knew," Raina said finally, her voice cold and clipped. She didn't turn to face Clara. "Knew what?" Clara asked, setting the cup down. She had a sinking feeling she already knew the answer. "That my grandfather was using you to teach me something," Raina snapped, spinning around to glare at Clara. "That I was his little project." Clara shook her head, her expression earnest. "I didn't know, Raina. I swear. I just thought he wanted me here because of that whole life debt thing." Raina's eyes narrowed. "So you didn't know he thinks I'm inadequate? That I'm some spoiled, stubborn child who needs a human to fix her?" "Whoa, hold on," Clara said, raising her hands. "That's not what this is about. He cares about you. He just thinks I'm a failure," Raina finished bitterly, her voice rising. "He couldn't even say it to my face. He brought you here to do it for him." Clara stood, crossing the room to stand in front of Raina. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "You're not a failure. Do you know what he told me about you? He said you're brilliant. He said you have the potential to be a great leader." Raina laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Then why didn't he just say that? Why all the manipulation?" "Because he's scared," Clara replied. "He's scared that you're too much like him, stubborn and proud, and that you won't listen to anyone else. So he brought me here because I'm not afraid to call you out when you're wrong." Raina blinked, taken aback. For a moment, her sharp facade cracked, and Clara saw the vulnerable young woman underneath. The flashpoint. Before Raina could respond, the estate's alarm system blared to life. The walls shimmered with red warning lights, and a voice announced in the Lyran language that an intruder had breached the perimeter. "What now?" Clara muttered, already moving toward the control panel. Raina's expression hardened, her vulnerability replaced by determination. "It's the rival houses," she said grimly. "They've been trying to undermine my grandfather for years. They must have learned he's weakened from the crash." Clara glanced at Raina, alarmed. "And they picked now to attack. Great timing." Raina ignored the sarcasm, activating a holographic map of the estate. Red dots representing the intruders were closing in fast. "They won't stop until they reach the council chambers," she said. "That's where the central archives are stored, data that could cripple our house if it falls into the wrong hands." Clara's mind raced. "What's the plan?" Raina hesitated for a split second before answering. "We split up. I'll secure the archives. You head to the power grid and activate the lockdown protocol." Clara raised an eyebrow. "You're trusting me with the power grid?" That's new. Reyna gave her a tight smile. Don't make me regret it. A high-stakes mission. The two women moved swiftly, their earlier argument forgotten in the face of the new threat. Clara sprinted through the crystalline corridors, her boots echoing on the smooth floor. The estate was massive, and the map Reyna had sent to her wrist communicator was barely keeping her from getting lost. She reached the power grid just as a group of intruders appeared at the far end of the corridor. They were tall and armored, their faces hidden behind metallic masks. Clara ducked behind a pillar, her heart pounding. "Okay, Clara," she whispered to herself. "Think. You've handled worse." Spotting a loose panel on the wall, she pried it open and began rerouting the security grid. Sparks flew as she worked quickly, bypassing the damaged circuits. The sound drew the intruders closer, their footsteps growing louder. "Almost there," Clara muttered, sweat dripping down her forehead. Finally, the lockdown protocol activated. The lights dimmed, and heavy doors slammed shut throughout the estate, trapping the intruders in isolated sections. Clara exhaled in relief, but her victory was short-lived. One of the intruders had reached her, a blade glinting in their hand. Before Clara could react, a blast of energy struck the intruder, sending them sprawling. Clara turned to see Reyna standing in the doorway, a sleek Lyran weapon in her hand. "Nice timing," Clara said, her voice shaky. Reyna smirked. "You didn't think I'd leave you to handle this alone, did you?" The truth comes full circle. With the lockdown in place, the intruders were neutralized, and Calyx's guards quickly secured the estate. Back in the Grand Hall, Clara and Reyna stood before Calyx, who looked more tired than Clara had ever seen him. "You did well," Calyx said, his voice heavy with pride. "Both of you." Reyna folded her arms, her expression unreadable. "Grandfather, why didn't you just tell me the truth? Why bring Clara into this?" Calyx sighed, his shoulders sagging. "Because I've always believed actions speak louder than words. I could have told you how much I believed in you, but you needed to see it for yourself, and Clara was the one person I knew could show you." Reyna glanced at Clara, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "You could have just said that instead of manipulating both of us." Calyx chuckled softly. "Perhaps, but would you have listened?" Reyna didn't answer, but the faint smile on her lips was enough for Clara to know that Calyx's gamble had paid off. The elder Lyran had succeeded in bridging the gap between his granddaughter and the human who had saved his life. As the tension in the room finally eased, Clara stretched her arms and grinned. "Well, I don't know about you two, but I could really use some sleep." Reyna rolled her eyes but smiled. "You've earned it, human." For the first time since their journey began, Clara felt like she truly belonged. A new chapter. The sun rose over the Lyran estate, casting a warm, golden glow over the crystalline structures. Clara stood on the balcony of her guest quarters, sipping a cup of alien tea that had become her unlikely favorite. The events of the past few days swirled in her mind. Calyx's crash, the predators, the tense partnership with Reyna, and the intruder's attack. It felt surreal, like a story she might read in a spaceport waiting lounge. Yet here she was, standing on an alien world, at the center of it all. Her peace was interrupted by a knock at the door. Turning, she saw Reyna standing in the doorway, a datapad in her hands. Gone was the sharp, condescending glare that had defined their early interactions. In its place was a softer, more thoughtful expression. "Busy?" Reyna asked, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. "Just enjoying the view," Clara replied. "You Lyrans know how to pick a spot for a house." Reyna allowed herself a small smile, then held out the datapad. "I thought you'd want to see this." Clara took the pad, scanning its contents. Her eyes widened as she realized what it was. A detailed summary of the improvements they had implemented together, from the decentralized power nodes to the adjustments in the terraforming protocols. The report included glowing commendations from Lyran officials, praising their collaboration. "They're impressed," Reyna said, leaning against the wall. Some are even suggesting we present these findings to the Galactic Council as a model for interspecies cooperation. Clara blinked, stunned. Wait, what? The Galactic Council? As in, the bigwigs of the galaxy. Reyna nodded. Yes, my grandfather is already preparing the proposal. He believes it's time to show the galaxy what humans and Lyrans can achieve together. A heartfelt moment. Clara set the datapad down, her excitement tempered by doubt. Why me? I mean, I'm just an engineer. I didn't sign up to be a diplomat. Reyna tilted her head, studying Clara. Because you see things differently. You challenge us in ways no Lyran ever could. That's what we need right now, perspectives that shake us out of our routines. Clara smirked. So, you're saying you actually like having me around? Reyna rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. Don't push your luck, human. The two shared a rare laugh, the tension between them dissolving. For the first time, Clara felt that Reyna saw her as more than an outsider. There was respect there, maybe even friendship. Reyna's tone turned serious. Clara, I owe you an apology. I didn't make this easy for you. I was difficult. You think? Clara teased, then softened her tone. Look, I get it. Your grandfather put a lot on your shoulders. But you're good at what you do, Reyna. You don't need anyone's approval, not even his. Reyna looked out at the horizon, her expression contemplative. Maybe. But I've learned something from you too. Strength isn't just about being right. It's about being willing to adapt, to trust. Clara grinned. Well, look at you, sounding all human. A farewell. For now. Later that day, Clara stood in the estate's landing bay, her belongings packed and ready. Caelix was there to see her off, his regal demeanor softened by genuine gratitude. You've done more for my house than I could have imagined, Caelix said, his glowing eyes meeting hers. Reyna has grown because of you, and so have I. Clara waved him off. Don't get all sentimental on me, Caelix. You're gonna make me cry. He chuckled, clasping her hand. Take this, he said, handing her a small, intricately carved crystal, a token of my gratitude, and a reminder that you will always have a place in our house. Clara stared at the crystal, its surface shimmering with an inner light. Thanks, she said, her voice softer now. That means a lot. Reyna approached, her usual stoic expression replaced by something gentler. You'll be back, she said, not a question but a statement. Clara raised an eyebrow. Oh, will I? You will, Reyna said firmly. There's more work to do. And besides, who else is going to argue with me the way you do? Clara laughed. I'll take that as an invitation. The final scene. As Clara's transport ship lifted off, she looked out the window at the Lyran estate, growing smaller with each passing second. Her heart felt unexpectedly heavy. She hadn't just survived an alien world. She had built something there, something that felt like a bridge between two vastly different worlds. She clutched the crystal Caelix had given her, a symbol of what she had accomplished, and what lay ahead. The stars stretched endlessly before her, and for the first time, Clara felt a sense of purpose beyond herself. As the ship accelerated into hyperspace, Clara smiled. This wasn't the end of her story, it was just the beginning.